Welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here. For this session, I want you to imagine that you and I are sitting down together in a quiet, comfortable mountain lodge for a one-on-one coaching retreat. Go ahead and grab a cup of tea or coffee, get settled into that deep leather chair by the fire, and let's get ready to do some real growth work together. Today, we are fundamentally changing the way you think about personal limits. We're looking at the concept of boundaries not as invisible lines in the sand, but as architectural blueprints. Just like a physical building, your boundaries require a strong, precise foundation to stand upright when the winds of life start blowing. If the foundation is weak, well, the whole structure collapses. So today, we're putting on our hard hats and learning how to build boundaries that actually hold their ground.
Here is a question I want you to seriously ask yourself right now as we sit here. What exactly goes into building a personal boundary? Think about it for a second. When you try to set a limit with someone, maybe it's a boss asking you to work the weekend when you're already totally maxed out, or a family member who just continually oversteps. What materials are you actually using to build that wall? I mean, most people think a boundary is just a sudden feeling of frustration followed by blurting out the word no. But if we're treating this like a true architectural project, we have to recognize that feelings are not structural, right? If I asked you to build a load-bearing wall on a house, you wouldn't just throw some drywall up and cross your fingers hoping it holds the roof. You'd need studs, joists, and concrete. So do you truly know the precise load-bearing components required to construct an effective personal limit?
To get us on the exact same page here, let's define our core topic. When we talk about the architecture of personal boundaries, based on our source material, we're talking about a precise, structured framework. It's a specific set of load-bearing variables required to construct and maintain a functional personal limit. I absolutely love this definition because it takes all the guesswork out of the whole shebang. In our session today, this is our foundational definition. It tells us that a boundary isn't just some desperate declaration you make when you're completely overwhelmed. No way. It's an actual, robust structure that needs to be methodically and deliberately built well before you ever actually need to use it.
Okay, let's dive into this because this is where our coaching session gets really practical. Have you ever wondered why so many of our boundaries just fail? Like, why do we set limits on a Monday only to find ourselves completely caving in by Thursday? Look, don't beat yourself up over it. It's honestly because a lot of us were handed a completely flawed blueprint to begin with. We're out here trying to build a heavy structure using the wrong mathematical formula. And obviously, when the real-world pressure is applied, the math simply doesn't hold up. So let's take a look at the formula that a lot of people mistakenly rely on to try and keep themselves safe.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the contrast between what we kind of assume works and what actually works. Look at the hypothetical formula on the left side of your screen. It suggests that a boundary equals awareness plus capacity plus meaning plus communication plus consistency. And on the surface, that sounds pretty solid, right? You communicate what you need, you stay consistent with it, but our source material specifically flags this as a hypothetical and ultimately incorrect formula. Now shift your focus over to the right side, the core philosophy formula. This right here is the structurally sound blueprint. A true boundary actually equals capacity plus clarity plus access plus meaning plus embodied action. Notice how communication and consistency are entirely swapped out for clarity, access, and embodied action. This right side is exactly what we're going to use for your personal architecture moving forward.
Let's completely pivot to that right side. We're taking that hypothetical blueprint, tossing it in the fireplace, and we are going to solely focus on the true framework. As your coach in this exercise, I really want us to deconstruct the exact pillars of this core philosophy formula. Because listen, if you want to protect your time, your energy, and your peace, you have got to understand exactly what material each of these 5 variables is made of. We're going to look at capacity, clarity, access, meaning, and embodied action, and see exactly how they hold up the roof of your personal limits when things get tough.
Let's review our materials list and see how these distinct variables lock together. First up, we have capacity. You must actually have the internal bandwidth, the physical energy, and the emotional space to build and hold that wall. Without it, you're building on sand. Then, clarity. Actually, you can't just communicate vaguely, like the old formula suggested. You've got to have razor-sharp internal clarity about where the line actually is. Next is access. Do you have access to the internal tools, the permission, and the resources to uphold this limit? Then comes meaning. Why does this boundary matter to your core values? How does it tie into your life's vision? And finally, embodied action. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the biggest shift from the old blueprint. You see, a boundary isn't just consistency. Consistency is often just repetitive communication. It's basically saying the same thing over and over. Embodied action is living it out in your physical reality. It's something you do, not just something you say. Each of these 5 variables acts as a critical, load-bearing pillar in our new equation.
So, now that we know what the 5 static pillars are, we have to understand how to actually assemble them. Think about it. If you're building a beautiful chalet up here in the mountains, you definitely don't build the roof before you pour the concrete foundation, right? Well, the exact same goes for the core philosophy formula. These aren't just 5 random ingredients you throw into a bowl all at once and mix up. They function together sequentially in the real world to build that structural integrity. You have to build them in order, step by step, making absolutely sure each pillar is fully secure before you stack the next one on top of it. Otherwise, the whole thing comes toppling down.
Let's step through this together. Bring to mind a boundary you know you need to set tomorrow. Got it? Okay. Step 1, capacity. Before you do anything else, check your internal battery. Do you have the actual strength and energy to set and defend this limit right now? Step 2, clarity. Once you have the capacity, get crystal clear on what the exact line is. No gray areas, no fuzzy edges, just a sharp line. Step 3, access. Now that the line is clear, tap into your access. Give yourself the inner permission and access the internal tools required to hold that line without guilt. Step 4, meaning. Anchor it. Remind yourself why this boundary is deeply meaningful to your well-being. Ask yourself, what am I protecting? And finally, everything logically leads to Step 5, embodied action. Because you have the capacity, the clarity, the access, and the meaning, you can now step fully into action, physically living the boundary out in reality rather than just talking about it.
As we wrap up our coaching session in this explainer today, I really want to leave you looking inward. Look at those 5 architectural components one more time. Capacity, clarity, access, meaning, and embodied action. When you think about a boundary in your life right now that is currently crumbling, which structural element is missing? Are you jumping straight to action without real clarity? Or maybe you're trying to hold a boundary when your capacity is literally at absolute 0. I want you to evaluate your blueprint this week. Thank you so much for joining me in the lodge for this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.